Welcome to the Painting Lines Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things tennis. Join Erik and Aidan in their discussion for updates on news and pop culture, and from hot takes to betting, they've got you covered.
Ready? Play.
Welcome back to Painting Lines. Last week we talked about the innovations in the serve and volley, and this week we're going to be looking back at a sort of review of the Miami Open. I think overall it was a great couple weeks of tennis. What did you think, Erik?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm glad I got to make it down to Miami to watch a few matches in person. And yeah, I thought it was, good quality tennis. We're kind of at that stage where it's a toss up every tournament without, you know, Djokovic in or Nadal or Federer. So it's a fun time. It's an exciting time in tennis, and we'll see, what the next couple of years has in store.
Yeah, it seems like we're kind of getting like right at the passing of the baton from
Hmm.
the Djokovic, Nadal, Federer era, and it seems like we're almost going to getting a preview of what's going to come in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and it wasn't too hot in Miami either, because I know in some past tournaments, players have been, cramping up because of the humidity or kind of like sweating through their shirts, getting like slipping. So it was great that the weather was able to hold up too, because
Yeah,
that makes a huge impact.
that did seem to kind of make an impact later on in the tournament, though.
Right.
I think 2 weeks of hard tennis, and if you're making a late run in these tournaments, you're going to be seeing a lot more cramping from those players.
Right. It's very important to stay hydrated. Remember the gill juice in Andre Agassi's
Yeah,
book Open that he explained? I would
exactly.
want to try that.
I mean, I'm sure they probably have some sort of like something like a liquid IV or a drink like
Hmm.
that at this point where it accomplishes a very similar purpose, but he was very far ahead of his time with that sort of electrolyte drink and all the nutrients that it was giving him.
Right. So, what were some of your favorite moments of the tournament?
I mean, over the last couple weeks, I think one of my favorite moments was Wawrinka's long run in Indian Wells. It's just really cool to see when a player that most considers past their prime is making a run way further than people expect. And it kind of just shows the class that he had and sort of gives just an idea of how actually dominant he was compared to everyone else other than the big three when he was at his peak.
Right. No, it is great to see him go far. He's got that gorgeous one-handed backhand, some nice strokes, and he is playing. Like you said, he's able to hang with those younger players. It's exciting to watch, and then he doesn't have much left in the tank, so we just have to appreciate all these moments when he does actually make it far. He's able to collect a nice little paycheck too. Good for
Exactly.
him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I also really liked when just seeing Sinner make the Miami final. I mean, it's
Mm.
cool to see him get success. I like Sinner. I'm a big fan of his, and I think he's gonna have some difficulty breaking through against players like Alcaraz and Medvedev. But I think seeing him get a big win against Alcaraz was very cool.
Yeah, I didn't really want Sinner to make the final. I wasn't too happy about that. I wanted to see another Medvedev Alcaraz final rematch,
Were you
because I
hoping to?
think
Sorry.
I was hoping to see Medvedev and Alcaraz again, just like Indian Wells.
Do you think would you have been rooting for Alcaraz to get the Sunshine Double?
No, no, I wanted Medvedev because I want that to be the next big rivalry in tennis, Medvedev Alcaraz.
Well, I mean,
And
this at this point it is like seems at this point technically the rivalry is balanced. They've split 1-1 in their two matchups.
that's not a rivalry.
Not yet,
Two
not yet.
matches.
Yeah,
No, we need
well,
to see them in the majority of finals going forward.
isn't that kind of a negative though? Don't you want to see more
No,
players in different? You,
no.
you think it's better if it's just two
I
horse
think
show?
it makes the sport more exciting. I miss the competitiveness of it. I feel like nowadays players are way too nice, they're almost all friends on tour. Like I want to see some competition. I want to see them get after it like they used to.
You want to
Plus,
see?
I think it would have been a better final anyway. That would have kind of handed it to Sinner pretty easily. I
That's
think
true.
Alcaraz would have given us a show at least.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a one-sided final.
Did you know Sinner was like a very good skier too when he was a kid? I'm pretty
Uh,
sure he didn't start playing tennis till he was almost 12, 13.
I mean,
But he's an athlete. He's
that's believable. I think a lot of players like you can see like, have the ability to play other sports at a high
mhm.
level.
Yeah, I know JJ Wolf, he was a great baseball player in high school too. And then finally he had to pick one and he picked tennis because he thought he could have the most success, which look at him now. He's on the pro level tour.
Exactly, like the same thing I think happened with John Isner. Like John Isner was a great basketball player. I mean, he's 6'11", and he had to choose to play tennis because he felt he could have more success in it, and
Mhm.
he has.
Yeah, I know.
Did you have any favorite moments from the past couple tournaments?
Yeah, some of my favorite moments were actually the Tiafo Watanuki match. So I had never heard of Watanuki. He's a Japanese player, and he kind of came onto the scene first set, could not do any wrong. Tiafo was playing out of his mind, but Watanuki just had an answer for everything. Like this was probably one of the most exciting matches of the tournament because you had it on a smaller court. It was on the grandstand. So there was a more intimate crowd and you had a majority American crowd too, but then you saw a lot of Japanese in the crowd and it was just the atmosphere was insane. The tennis was phenomenal and it came down to a third set where ultimately Tiafo pulled it out. That was one of my favorite moments of the tournament.
That's exciting to see, but I think maybe that actually had an impact on Tiafo later on because he did end up losing in the next round, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I think that's one of those things where he had sort of a build up from Indian Wells because he obviously made that long run in Indian Wells and then comes into Miami and immediately gets tested by this guy and goes into the next round, and I think he was just drained.
Yeah, yeah. No, but it's always great to see Tiafo pull one out just because of the energy, like that's what fans want to see too. It gets them into the match. You see these spectacular shots, and then Watanuki, all credit to him, man. He was battling out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is interesting to see in the Miami Open. We did get some unique players going later on in the tournament, and I think that is a cool aspect kind of built off of the fact that the Sunshine Double does happen back to back
Hmm.
because you see players they're just more tired. They just played a long intense tournament, and so I think you see more upsets. And so we had like the round of 16. Hollis, Sonigo, and Manarino all made it there. All were completely unexpected to be there. And then the quarterfinals for Rusev Wari, Serendulo, and Eubanks, the American.
Yeah.
So very cool to see those guys like these three like guys that you don't expect to be there in the last eight. Pretty cool to see.
So you think it's cool? I don't like that personally.
I think it's cool to see. I mean, I think it's nice when there's some level of upsets. I mean, I don't like if it's
Hmm.
necessarily all the time. Like I want to see my favorite players make it far in tournaments, but I think if you just have the same, I think having the big three, there was a negative aspect to it where, as we kind of discussed in our big three episode, there's a negative aspect where you don't get a lot of unique play. You see the same thing over and over again. And there's a positive to that when it's such a high level, but there's also a negative that you don't get any mix ups.
So think I think it's good because yeah, you're right. You don't get much variability when it comes to styles of play, but I think the like competitiveness and if those are the styles of play that are getting two people to the final every single time, then I'd rather see that than some, you know, 100 plus player squeak through because he got a lucky draw and somehow made his way up there. Whereas, it took away from a player that was actually better than him. That's why I don't like how that. I think this isn't even a euphemism, but this, because of all these like unexpected players in Miami, it was literally the luck of the draw. Like you had quality players exit early, and then you have these guys. I don't know.
Well,
I'm not a fan.
I disagree because I feel that these guys, it wasn't like they didn't play. Like there were a couple of guys that got a little bit lucky
Hmm.
because other guys beat really good players. Like it wasn't like these players played nobodies. A lot of these guys beat good players early on in the tournament. Like Sonigo, I believe, beat Rude,
So I'm
and
not
it's like
going.
he 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 beat the number 3 in the world guy. Like that's not an easy run for him.
Mhm. I'm not discounting, these wins to these people. I'm just saying I don't like to see it because I feel like, with all due respect to these guys, but they're not gonna amount to much. I don't see Rusevori, Cerundolo, Eubanks, even Sonigo coming close to winning a slam. So I just would rather see the players that I know and like do well. I mean, yeah, call me a hater, but that's me. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess everyone's entitled to their own opinion. If you think these guys are, you're like, don't think these guys are gonna have any success. I
I,
mean,
I was a little harsh there, huh?
yeah,
I
a
said they
little
weren't gonna
bit,
amount
little
to.
bit.
But that's how I feel. I hate to see lower players do well.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel bad sometimes for if you really want to see a player have success. I mean, I remember in maybe 2012 or so. I'm not sure the exact year, but uh, Nadal like got eliminated super early on at Wimbledon uh, to like the 128th guy in the world, and I did feel like way worse for Nadal than I felt happy for this guy because
Hmm.
if you're expected to win, like he was one of the favorites to win the tournament, obviously,
Yeah.
and while it does feel great for this guy to pull out this amazing win, you have to consider it feels way worse for Nadal to have lost that match.
No, I agree, and don't get me wrong. I'm a big supporter of the underdog, but only when both players are at the top echelon, not a complete underdog. Like I'd like to see Tommy Paul beat Djokovic, but I don't like to see Sonego beat Tommy Paul.
What about if it was like Ben Shelton versus Djokovic?
I'm going with Djokovic.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's not as much really favoritism. It's really just about the this disparity in the rankings.
Right. Yes, exactly. And not even, yeah, I guess you could say that, but I would mostly say, yeah, I just don't want to see Ben Shelton take anything away from Djokovic because I don't even think you can compare those two players right now. When Ben Shelton made his run in the Australian Open, everyone was saying, "Oh, he's the next best thing. You know, he's gonna win all these slams. Look at him. He's only in college. He's a sophomore in college. He won the NCAA championships. He's on." But he hasn't proved anything yet.
Yeah,
I don't like all that the pre-hype.
I think it is important not to be overly e- put too many expectations on Ben Shelton at this point.
Well, speaking of Ben Shelton, I don't know if you saw, but his new sponsor is On Cloud, and those tennis outfits and shoes are sweet.
On
On
Cloud,
Cloud, the Roger Federer brand that he's backing.
I no, I don't know it.
Oh, dude, love it. It's a cool, because how you see some interesting stuff on tour. You have a lot of the Europeans wearing like kind of more sleeker fitting, like even some collared shirts, and then you have the South Americans. They like to wear brighter colors, a little tighter clothes, and then Ben Shelton with the on cloud. He had a big kind of like muscle shirt, tank top, and shorter shorts. It kind of reminded me of like 90s era tennis clothes.
That's cool. He's
Yeah,
on Cloud's gonna come out with the
I'm gonna buy some.
on Cloud's gonna come out with the jean shorts that Agassi had.
That would be too cool.
That I still think that's absolutely a ridiculous style.
I think the only player that can pull those off right now is JJ Wolf or Tommy Paul. They have the
JJ,
most swag.
I think JJ Wolf could. I don't think Tommy Paul could. I
JJ
think
Wolf
just
has the
JJ Wolf
quads.
could because he looks like almost a young Agassi.
He does when he had the mullet.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Jeez, jeez.
Yeah. So what do you think about Medvedev and his sort of like consistent level? Because he's made 5 straight finals. He's
Mhm.
won 4 out of those 5. He only lost to Alcaraz at Indian Wells. Do you think he's going to be sort of the benchmark of excellence for the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think he's going to be the guy where you expect him to be at least in the semifinal or the final, and if a player beats him, that's the guy that you're like that's the guy that's on form. That's the guy that's going to win the tournament.
Mhm. So I do. I think he's finally stepping into that that position. Like when he won his first U.S. Open, it wasn't really solidified yet, but now, like you said, he's been in the last 4 or 5 finals. He's finally actually cementing his spot in the top players. I don't think he will perform well though on every surface. I think he struggles with slower. For example, Indian Wells, he kind of had a tough time with the court. He actually preferred the faster Miami court. So it'll be interesting to see. I think he will be kind of the gold standard, but I still think Alcaraz will give him a lot of trouble in the future. He'll kind of be that thorn in his side. What about you? What do you think?
I definitely agree. I mean, he seems to just be like a perfect idea of consistency. Like always seems to be playing at a very high level. My what I'm wondering though is on a good day, like do you think Alcaraz win if they're both playing well, do you think it's Alcaraz or Medvedev that takes it?
I think Alcaraz. I think right now Alcaraz barely, but Medvedev is he's not a young guy by any means tennis wise. I think he's only like 26, but I think he'll just get better and better. Whereas Alcaraz right now, I think they're on the same mental aptitude, but Carlos is a little more athletic and has, I think, more skill than Medvedev. But I think as Medvedev matures and gets older, he'll start to have the stronger mentality and be able to kind of outmaneuver Carlos's athletic ability.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's spot on. I think the idea of Medvedev's mentality I think is going to be critical because I want to see how Alcaraz actually develops his mentality because he it's really important because from Medvedev he can has already had to learn to deal with sort of the difficulty of not having the fans on his side,
Mhm.
and I think that's a big actual benefit for his mentality because it's tough. It's tough to go out there when the fans are rooting for your opponent a lot of the time, and I think that sort of gives him a shield that will protect him for later on, and if there's a big tournament or something like that. But I don't know if Alcaraz necessarily has had to deal with any real like hate in the same way.
No, quite the opposite, I think. I think he pretty much wins over the fans every time.
Yeah.
But it's been great watching Medvedev mature and grow as a player because, like you said, he had to face brutal fans a couple years ago, and he didn't know how to handle it either. I think now he's well liked. I think when people watch him, they actually root for him and they appreciate his play. Like he's able to win a phenomenal point and then kind of look at the crowd and expect a cheer. Like before, he would taunt the crowd almost. He would win a point. He'd kind of like put his hand up to his ear or put his hand up to his mouth as if he was shushing him. Now he can like raise his hands and kind of like say, yeah, bring it on. Like, thank you. And the people, they stand for him, they cheer for him. I think he's kind of, like I said, he's getting into that next level of play. Like Djokovic was kind of the same way growing up. He was that bad boy of tennis, kind of the antagonist. And then he eventually grew into the spot where he is the kind of the fan favorite, or at least they respect him enough and respect his game.
Yeah. What do you think about the center in that rivalry of Alcaraz and Medvedev? Because a lot of the commentators were talking about, oh, this guy's Alcaraz and Sinner. It's the future of tennis. It's the future of tennis. But Medvedev is 6-0 versus Sinner at this point. If Sinner can't really break through versus Medvedev, it's going to be a thorn in that rivalry. It's going to be a wrench in that sort of
Mm-hmm.
storyline. Do you think that Sinner's going to be able to develop and contest uh, against Medvedev, or do you think Medvedev's going to continue to just have his number?
Yeah, I think people are comparing Alcaraz and Sinner because they're closer in age, whereas Medvedev's around 6 or 7 years older than both of them. But I think Sinner has what it takes to beat Alcaraz. He's shown it in the Miami Open, but I think it's I'm not gonna say a fluke, but he doesn't have it yet. I think right now it'll be Alcaraz Medvedev with Sinner kind of poking around the outside, but then eventually Sinner will break in once Medvedev's kind of on the back end of his
Yeah.
dominance, and
Okay.
then I think they'll
So you
grow into
think
that
you think
rivalry.
Medvedev is going to continue to kind of just dominate Sinner until he starts to decline?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
What about you?
I think Sinner definitely has the capacity. I mean, he's growing really quickly, and like they one big thing that was very noticeable was he already looks a lot stronger. I think they're really
Mhm.
working, like his trainers, on helping him add muscle and making him a stronger hitter on the court. And I think that is something that could be really beneficial for him against someone like Medvedev. And I think if they continue to work on building his physique and making him stronger, I think he'll be able to break through against Medvedev before Medvedev is past his peak.
All right. So, do you want to see Sinner break through? Are you pro Sinner or anti Sinner?
I'm pro Sinner.
You're
Yeah.
pro Sinner.
I like Sinner. I like that he kind of just popped in. I mean,
Yeah.
he's kind of like Alcaraz in a way. He except for the fact that he didn't go straight to the actual top. Like he jumped in and he went really high up really quickly, but he
Hmm.
didn't actually break through in the sense that he showed up, I think, around 2019, 2020, and all of a sudden he went from like 500th in the world in early 2019 to all of a sudden by 2020 or 2021 he was in the top 20.
Right.
And so he just flew up right to the top rankings, but has kind of struggled a little bit because he was still having to deal with obviously Federer or like Nadal and Djokovic being at the top.
Hmm.
Alcaraz got a little bit lucky because he hasn't had to deal with that quite as much. I think,
Right.
I mean, he obviously he's had to play against Nadal and Djokovic, but they're a little bit older and there have been a lot of tournaments they haven't been able to play.
Hmm.
So that kind of builds into my next point. Alcaraz, after losing in Miami, he loses the number one ranking.
Hmm.
And I think it's a big topic. Like, is this number one ranking that he had, is it deserved? Like, what do you think about that?
So, how does he lose his number one ranking when
Because he
Djokovic didn't
won
even
Miami
play?
is because he won Miami last year and it's like a 1 year system, I'm pretty sure. So because he didn't win Miami this year, he only got the uh, points for winning through the quarterfinals.
Hmm.
And so, like, say winning the tournament, you get 1,000 points. and winning through the quarterfinals, you get 700 points. So when that 1,000 points ages out for the 1 year system, he loses the
Oh, okay.
1,000 and it gets replaced with the 700. So he goes
Gotcha.
down by 300 points.
Got it. Okay. And I do remember hearing Taylor Fritz talk about the point system where it's actually not as beneficial to make it deep in these smaller tournaments versus like winning a, or not even winning, but entering a slam. For example, like you kind of not screw yourself, but if you're making it deep in these smaller ATP tournaments, but not winning them, and then um, you're tying yourself out, first of all, and then second of all, you're not getting as many points as someone who say would be well rested and even makes it to the second round of a slam. But anyway, um, what do I think about him falling from his number one ranking?
Well, do you think that this number one ranking that he had was like deserved if he's not playing against someone like Djokovic? Like,
Yeah, just because, yeah, I mean, it's pretty objective. It's based on points, and he had the most points. So I think fair. Yes, it's fair, but is it legitimate?
but I mean, well, I think you almost have it flipped because I think it is legitimate. I mean, he has enough points, but whether it's fair, like he hasn't had to really play. Nadal's been injured a lot recently, and Djokovic hasn't had to play in or hasn't been able to play in all these big tournaments. I mean, the first time he got it, he was after the U.S. Open, and at that point, obviously, Djokovic wasn't able to play, and then he gets it again recently uh, when he wins Indian Wells, and he gets it because again Djokovic isn't there. I feel
Hmm.
like in a sense it's almost like a an asterisk sort of situation. Like what Djokovic not being there sort of casts a shadow of it not being like a very fair thing for him to have gotten that number one ranking because there have been a lot of players where they could have been number one in the world, but they had to sit behind Nadal or Djokovic or Federer.
Hmm.
And the fact that he's been able to get there, it's cool. And I think he definitely deserved to be the number one in the world at some point. He's definitely that good, but I feel like he's getting it super early for the fact that Djokovic is still at such a high level.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely an asterisk number one, but I kind of compare that to a more like high level. I think, for example, the Miami Open, Medvedev's win at the Miami Open is also kind of asterisk because he had to play center and not Alcaraz. I think it's kind of the same deal where, yeah, these players are gaining these achievements, but in in reality, like were they deserved? Maybe not.
But I kind of just see there's where we have a difference of opinion because
Hmm.
I think that's just how tournaments go. Like Alcaraz was in the tournament, he made it to the semifinal, and then he lost. It's not like he wasn't playing in the tournament. So I don't think there's really like for me, Medvedev doesn't deserve an asterisk for not for winning the Miami Open because he played. He
He didn't play the best of
all
the
the
best.
everybody except Djokovic was there. I mean, that's the only thing that I could say would apply the asterisk was the fact that Djokovic wasn't there. But Alcaraz was there. He just lost. Like you can't say, oh, Djokovic was when Djokovic was number one in the world. If he didn't make the final, or if when Federer was number one in the world, if he didn't make the final, then everyone that won a tournament in that entire era should have an asterisk because they didn't have if they didn't have to play Federer.
Yeah.
I feel like that's not the best way to look at it. I think, but I
It's
feel
not the
like,
best way to look at it, but also it kind of is a little bit of it's not the same thing as not playing in the tournament completely, but it's pretty damn close. Like if Djokovic wasn't there, he wasn't there in the tournament. Alcaraz was there, but he wasn't in the final. Neither was Djokovic.
Yeah, but
Neither of them
but
were in the final.
he got Alcaraz got beaten. Like
Yeah, but
that's just
maybe
how
that didn't
tournaments
have.
work.
Yes, that is how tournaments work. But tournaments also work to the point where people don't play in them every time.
That's true. But yeah, I think the Djokovic situation is a little bit different just
Hmm.
because it's not based on an injury or something like that. It's just him being excluded.
Hmm. Okay.
But I'm
All right.
glad it's gonna be over soon.
You think?
Well, isn't it aren't they letting him back into America for the US Open?
Yeah, but he'll get to that point where he won't play in every tournament. He's kind of. I mean, I don't think he's there yet, but he's definitely going to be a little more picky when it comes to choosing which ones he will and won't play in. Because
Yeah.
remember, he took a beating in the Australian Open. I think he had a massive hamstring tear too. So his body's getting old. He's got to take care of it.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think we're gonna start seeing. He's already sort of, I think, doing
mhm.
definitely a cool down. Like doesn't play as many tournaments as he used to, but he still plays in most of the major ones. So
Yeah, I'm excited. All right, let's talk about the Americans.
yeah,
Made a pretty good run, huh?
yeah. I
Last
mean,
couple weeks.
especially like Tommy Paul and Taylor Fritz. I mean, they didn't really contest for winning in these tournaments, but they both had like really high levels of quality, like very consistent. I think Paul lost twice in the round of 16, and Fritz lost twice in the quarterfinals or something like that.
Yeah, Fritz lost to Sinner and Indian Wells, and then Alcaraz in Miami.
Exactly, and I think Tommy Paul also lost to Alcaraz in Indian Wells
Yeah.
and
No,
FAA
Alcaraz.
in
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Miami, and like they're both playing. I think great. I think it's good to see that they're able to have that consistency because with some of the other Americans, I feel like there are issues with the consistency. Like we were talking about earlier with Tiafo,
Hmm.
he played excellently Indian Wells. He made the semifinal, and then in Miami, he kind of struggled. I think he just kind of ran out of gas.
Yeah, I know. Well, the thing I didn't like about Fritz this tournament was in his press conference after losing to Carlos Alcaraz. He said that it was tougher than playing any of the big three. He said he couldn't do anything with those shots. Like Alcaraz was hitting winners on him that he had never seen before, and then shots that he would think would be winners, Alcaraz was returning. But what do you
That's
think about that statement? That's a very loaded statement.
That's blasphemy, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
Like,
Come on.
that's insane for him to say that. I mean, he never had to play against someone like Nadal in his prime. He never had to play against a Federer in his prime. I mean, maybe he played these guys and he says, I guess maybe it's easier for him to play against a like 35-year-old
Yeah.
Nadal than a 19-year-old Alcaraz. But based on the way that maybe it was just the way the media was portraying his comments, but it seemed like he was saying like, "Oh, Alcaraz is better than these guys. Like
Yeah. That's the
his
way I took it.
his skill level is higher than these guys is." And I'm just like, if that's what he meant, then that's pretty insane of him to say.
Hmm.
If it was taken out of context in a way, and what he meant was right now, I'd rather play Alcaraz than the big three. Okay, but if he was saying his skill level at this point is better than they ever were, I think that's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that was him just trying to justify his loss to Carlos Alcaraz. You think about it, you lose, you're upset, you just kind of um, help yourself out by making yourself feel better, however you do it. And I think that was just him trying to, you know, essentially blunt his loss because it's tough.
Yeah,
He got beat pretty handedly.
yeah,
So
it's definitely not easy to go into a press conference. I mean, obviously we talked about this before, but you don't want to go into a press conference after losing and then be like, "Yeah, this guy was garbage today." Then they're like, What were you then?" Like
yeah,
we saw that.
dumpster fire.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, yeah, and then someone like Ben Shelton, we kind of talked about that. Like, we don't want to put too many expectations on this guy. I
It
mean,
was.
he was out relatively early in Indian Wells and Miami,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, there's a level where it's like those losses were it. We kind of have to be under understanding of those losses because he lost to good players. I mean, he lost to Fritz in Indian Wells, I believe,
Yeah.
and then
But
it,
Manarino,
but here's the thing. Manarino's a crafty player. He's a
Manarino,
crafty player. He's a veteran of the tour. Like he's
yeah,
beaten good players.
he could probably be Ben Shelton's dad.
But still, like he's beaten good players in the past. He's a great veteran player that's been on the tour for a while, and Ben
Yeah.
Shelton is barely inside the top 40 at this point. I mean,
Right.
which is super impressive. He's only 20 years old, but
Mhm.
he's only inside the top 40. It's not like he's like ranked number 5 in the world at this point. So him losing to a player like Manarino has to be not expected, but like understood. Like this
Yes.
guy's going to lose some of those matches at this point.
It's interesting to see, like you said, he's only 20 years old, but then again, Sinner's only 20, Alcaraz is only 20. The maturity level is so different between those two. And it wasn't a skill thing that Manarino got the upper hand on Shelton. I think it was just strictly maturity. Like you won't see Alcaraz or Sinner losing to Manarino, but Shelton, he's got that massive serve. He's got great strokes, but he's not consistent enough, at least. Like Manarino was able to outlast him. They went 3 sets. You thought in the beginning Shelton was going to win because he beat him pretty good the first set, and he had the crowd behind him too. Obviously, being American in an American tournament, I just think I think he fell off mentally. That's what it comes down to. It wasn't a skill disparity. It was just strictly him not being mature enough to handle an older player, an older man like Manarino.
Not being able to handle an older man. Yeah, well, I think
He
that
got
is something.
outmaneuvered by the Manarino.
Yeah, I think I think that is something that Ben Shelton is going to have to develop, just the ability to beat these players that are high level players and but aren't necessarily have the same style, because Manarino does have a little bit of a weird style,
Hmm.
and I think that that's sort of what got to him. Like he didn't know how to play against that necessarily.
Yeah, they're both lefties too. So
Yeah, the lefty versus lefty matchup sometimes is
yeah,
a little weird.
exactly. You're not used to it.
Exactly.
I,
So I think I think if he I think it's just a matter of time, sort of.
mhm.
He hasn't been on the tour for that long, and I understand that other people have, but that adjustment period is just going to be expected.
Definitely. So how about the big foe? I don't know about you, but to me it's kind of seemed like he's been overshadowed by younger players like Shelton or Tommy Paul or Fritz ever since he made that semifinal in the US Open. You don't really hear too much about Tiafo anymore.
Well,
Is that just me or what do you think?
I think he just doesn't have the same level of consistency. It seems like,
Mhm.
because obviously he made that U.S. Open, but that was recent. I mean, that was last year, right? So
Yeah.
and then he made the Indian Wells semifinal. It's like he can play at that level, and it's just not on a consistent basis is the thing.
Mhm.
So it's like I think if he works on, maybe it's his mental strength, maybe it's like he needs to work on conditioning or something like that. I think if he can elevate his ability to stay consistent in these tournaments and not have these flashes of brilliance for a couple matches that kind of burns out, I
Yeah.
think he'll be back sort of in the spotlight.
Yeah, I hope so because I would like to see him, excel, but I feel like he's not really playing in as many tournaments either. At least he wasn't, but hmm. All
Okay.
right. Are you excited for the clay court season?
Yeah, well, I mean,
I'm ready for it.
I think it's gonna be very different. I think hopefully we get sort of a mix up a little bit. I think
Mm,
it would be interesting to see how switching to clay court impacts this Alcaraz Medvedev dominance. I mean, we saw didn't Alcaraz played in those South American tournaments, which were
yeah.
clay court,
Yep.
and he was dominating on those. So it'll be interesting to see if he comes into the clay court season and Roland Garros and is playing at that high of a level.
Yeah, no, I think players like Casper Ruud or Cam Norrie, players with bigger shots and who actually perform better on slower courts, are you're going to see them start to do well in these clay court
Or
tournaments.
Tsitsipas. I mean, Tsitsipas
Tsitsipas, even
is
exactly.
a great clay court player, and he hasn't been really competing at these
Hmm.
tournaments as much. And I think if he gives himself a little bit of time to recover, he could be back in that conversation with Medvedev and Alcaraz and Sinner playing at the top.
Yeah, no, and I know I bring up Tommy Paul a lot, but I think he's got great potential too because he actually won the juniors Roland Garros.
Wow, that's
So
very,
yeah,
very
let's
cool.
see if he can win the real deal.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think we
But
can
he's got
expect here? I think Djokovic obviously coming back. Do you think he's just going to dominate? I mean, he's had some time off. Do you think
let's
do you,
see, let's
do you
see.
think do you
There's
think with him coming back and he's do you think he's going to be fresh or rusty?
I don't think he's definitely gonna be fresh for sure, but rusty, I don't think so. I think it's gonna be he'll win his matches, but he won't do it as handedly as he will in I don't know, a couple months when he's in mint condition. Like I think right now he's just getting back into it and then give him two tournaments and he'll be right back to dominating, I think.
So do you think, but like by Roland Garros, he's going to be just ready
Yeah,
to play it at
yes.
insanely high
Yeah.
level?
I think it'll be Alcaraz Djokovic
What
Roland
you don't
Garros
think
final.
Nadal is going to?
No. No. I hate to say it, but I think Nadal is kind of on his way out.
Yeah, I mean, no Alcaraz or Nadal in the Monte Carlo Masters, so
Yeah. Yeah.
that's pretty big. Kind of unfortunate to see for a lot of those people that are probably going to that tournament. I mean,
Hmm.
those are two big names that people probably wanted to see, and not having them be there is unfortunate. But
Yeah.
they got to do what they got to do to be ready for bigger tournaments later on.
Definitely. So how do you think Medvedev's gonna do this clay court season?
I mean, I think obviously he's probably been trying to really work on his clay court game, so I think he could be successful. We'll see. What we'll see, I think, in Monte Carlo will definitely give a good idea of how he's going to do at the French Open because he it'll give kind of an insight into how much work he's done on his clay court game.
I'm gonna throw a hot take out there, but I don't think Medvedev will ever win a clay title.
That's a yeah, bold take.
I don't think so.
I
He'll
mean,
do great. He'll have, a couple Australian Opens, couple US Opens, but never a Roland
so
Garros.
he's going to be almost like Federer, except for
Yeah.
Federer's luck.
Yeah. I think nah, don't say he's gonna be like Federer, but similar to Federer's Grand Slam ratio
No, well, that's
from
what I
yeah, yeah,
meant.
from okay, from
What,
surfaces.
what did you think I meant?
Like he
I'm
was
confused.
literally gonna win 20 Grand Slams
No,
with
yeah. I
only
mean, I
only a
just meant,
couple.
yeah. I just meant like in terms of
Federer
the
has what?
ratio.
One or two?
One.
Roland Garros. One? That's it?
Yeah. And
Jeez.
he didn't have to beat like a lot of people kind of look down on that aspect of his game because he never even had to beat like
Nadal.
Nadal
Oh.
to win one.
Oh.
So like it's not people like he's great on these other surfaces, but on clay he's just not at the same level.
Jeez. All right, let's jump into segments here, huh?
Okay, sounds good.
Let's do it. So I saw that Alcaraz is no longer the youngest player ranked in the top 100. It now belongs to a French player named Luca Van Ash. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and he's playing Davidovich Fokina today actually in the Astora Open. So it'll be cool to keep tabs on him, see how he progresses in the next couple months.
Yeah, I wonder if he'll break up into like the top because I think if a lot of the guys if they're super young they break into the top 100. The
Hmm.
top 50 is like right there for those guys.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
What
very
do
cool
you
to see. Uh,
what do you have?
big thing that I saw this week was there are rumors that Nadal might actually retire after the French Open.
Mm.
So that's a little bit sad to see. I mean, obviously,
It's
end of an era.
bittersweet, yeah, because you don't like to see him struggle. Like I'd rather just see him retire and go out on a good note than just keep losing in these tournaments. Kind of
Yeah,
like a Brett Favre, you know. Like I wish he would just retire instead of kept coming back and was kind of a shell of a man by the end of his career.
yeah. I see what you're saying, but
It's
it does,
hard to know when to step away.
and it definitely
Trust
feels
me.
bad too, because I mean, it's really difficult to know exactly when to step away because he won the French Open last year. Like
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
he
No, you're
was
right. You're right.
so recently at such a high level. It's hard to say my time is done.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I mean, my question is like, if you're someone like Dominic Thiem, right?
Yeah.
He's a lot younger, obviously, but he's looking at his career right now, and he's like, "What's my route back to like being at the top? Like, is he gonna retire at some point relatively soon? Like, what do you think about
Yeah.
that?
Do I think he's gonna retire? No, but he also didn't have the career that Nadal had, so I don't think it's apples to apples there. Like if he were to retire, it would be more so like a, hey, you know, I have to step away for because there's really no reason for him to retire unless he's just kind of sick and tired of losing. Whereas Nadal's reason to retire is he physically cannot play anymore. You know,
Yeah,
like it's gonna take a lot more.
what I mean is like the idea of like choosing to retire when you're on the downturn versus when you're near the top. Because Nadal's still near the top. So he could keep playing and be winning a lot of matches. But then it's like, is it worth it to keep going at that point? Like at what point is it good to keep going even if you're losing?
I think as long as you're enjoying it, if he's, you know, that's his living. That's all he knows is tennis. So I think as long as he's loving what he's doing, then he should keep playing. But when it gets to the point where he's not happy anymore, he can just retire, go to his residence in Monaco and chill on a yacht for the rest of his life. Because
Yeah.
I know he won't be an announcer. I can tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, he could be. I could see it,
Yeah, maybe.
but he just needs to do a little bit of work on his English.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
or or be a Spanish announcer. That's
That's
always an
yeah,
option.
that is, yeah. Because he's not much of a personality in American tennis, but you know,
What do you think? Do you think people would watch if they knew Nadal was commentating like the Spanish broadcast? Do you think people would like watch that broadcast just to listen to like his thoughts?
yeah, I do. But then again, he's not like I said. This is maybe because his English isn't that great, but I just don't see him as a personality. You know, like, does he crack jokes when he gives his speech? Is he? I feel like for the most part, he talks a little fast and just kind of is there to play. You know, like he's not really socializing too much.
Yeah.
But
Okay. What do you have for the bet of the week?
bet of the week. So I saw Ben Shelton's playing Dami team in the Estora Open. So I
Mm.
have Ben Shelton plus 125.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think
Plus 120. Yeah.
that's a good bet, and I think it's kind of shocking that uh, Shelton is the underdog in that.
Yeah, I agree. So I feel like there's some good value there. You know, I always hate betting against Dami team. Love the guy, but I think this is going to be a good bet.
Yeah, I think whoever's making the lines was like, "Oh, this guy's won a U.S. Open," and
Yeah.
didn't look at the fact that he hasn't been
Yeah.
playing well recently.
Who do you have?
Uh, my bet is coming out of ATP Houston. Um, Tommy Paul is playing Yannick Hanfmann, and I think the bet to make,
Who?
yeah, exactly. But I think the bet to make is the game spread. Tommy Paul is the favorite, but it's only a minus 110. And
What? Who is this Yannick
the bet
Hoffman?
is to cover minus 2.5 games.
Oh, okay,
That's the
gotcha.
bet. So,
Yeah.
but I think that's a very small spread of games. I think Hanfman I've never really heard of, And
Hmm.
Tommy Paul is one of the top players in the world. So he's a minus 110 favorite to win by more than three games or more. I think that's a pretty like much a lock bet to make. Maybe I mean obviously anything can happen, but
Yeah.
that's a bet that I'd be very confident in.
Yeah, I like that bet. That's on Thursday, right? That game or that
Uh,
match.
I believe so.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that. I'm gonna tune in. It's interesting that Ben Shelton's playing in a store on not in Houston as an American player.
Yeah,
I
I
guess you
mean
gotta. I don't know how they pick which tournaments they play in. You think
maybe
they
he just
like
felt thought he
travel?
thought he'd have more success in that tournament.
I
I
mean,
don't know.
yeah. I mean, he'll be in Europe probably for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean
So maybe
that
you
that
just get
also
there
that
now.
also
Yeah, the
could be part
travel.
of it. Could be part of it is this Storal a hard court or clay court tournament?
No, it's Clay.
Is ATP Houston a hard or clay court tournament?
Clay.
Oh, they're both clay.
They're
Oh,
both
okay.
Clay. Yeah.
I didn't know that, but then my guess is just about it's about the travel then,
Yeah.
because
All
yeah,
right.
if you're already in Europe, you don't have to fly over there.
Let's get into match of the week.
Alrighty, my match of the week was the semifinal, Sinner versus Alcaraz. It was a
It's amazing.
wild match, and it was spectacular to watch. Um, Sinner went up early, went up 4-1, and then Alcaraz sort of settled in and fought back and won the first set in a tiebreak. And after that point, he's kind of seemed to be cruising. Like it seemed like Alcaraz was just going to run away with it. And then he had a chance at a break in the second set, and Sinner fought back and ended up winning the second set. And then going into the third, Alcaraz was really struggling with what looked like cramping,
Hmm.
and all the commentators were like, "This guy has nothing left." They were. I think honestly, the commentators were a little bit harsh. Like they were saying, "Oh, this guy is not prepared. Maybe he didn't hydrate correctly." Like they were. It seemed like they were kind of really being like, "This is completely on him. Like he's not conditioned correctly."
Yeah.
And I think that's a little harsh. I mean, it could have been an injury. They were speculating that it was cramps, but it could have been an injury of some kind. But then it he sort of started to recover after that, and so he lost the first two games of the third set, and then somehow was able to hold in the third game. If you can go back and watch that third
Hmm.
game of the last set, he held serve with zero mobility. He
Jeez.
could not move, and somehow Sinner just wasn't able to figure out how to get around. If Sinner had been able to get into longer points, he
Hmm.
would have won it. But Alcaraz was just trying to put everything away super quickly and managed to succeed at it, and
Wow.
went to 2-1, and then at 4-2, uh, Alcaraz had been like kind of fighting back, but then he double faulted twice in a row from game point. It was advantage Alcaraz, and then he double faulted twice in a row, and all of a sudden it was advantage Sinner, and then Sinner broke him and then closed it out on serve. So it was very topsy turvy match.
Yeah, I know one of the point of the tournament came from that match, and it was probably one of my favorite moments too, because you see the camera angle like after that point, it was Center had a little backhand flip that just passed Alcaraz, and Alcaraz fell on the floor, and they had a slow-mo camera angle that like showed Sinner just kind of like waving the crowd, like celebrating the point. And then in the background, you just see Carlos on the floor with his hands over his face, just in pure disbelief and just exhausted. And I think that pretty much sums up the whole match they had. It was incredible.
Yeah. What about
And
you?
so I had Tommy Paul versus Alcaraz. It wasn't a close match. It was 6-4, 6-4 Alcaraz, but I think whenever you have Tommy Paul and Alcaraz playing, you're gonna have some good rallies, a lot of hard hitting, a lot of finesse almost too. Like I love the drop shots that Alcaraz has, and then Tommy's response to them, where he'll run up and hit a little flick across or like a flick lob. So I saw some great points. The score doesn't really reflect how great the match was, but it's always fun to watch those two.
Yeah. And I mean,
It was
six
a
four,
great,
six
great,
four,
great display
like
of athletic
close match.
ability. hmm But
Alrighty.
all right, all right, that's it for today. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Send us a DM, shoot us an email. We'd love to hear your opinion. Catch you next week. All right, and that's the show. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Painting Lines Podcast. Feel free to shoot us a DM or email us any questions or thoughts at paintinglinespodcast@gmail.com.